Hey guys, Keith from Kegland, and today I'm really excited to say we've launched these new gluten-free fresh Wort kits. So up until now, the Fresh Cube brand has been basically all grain kits, for our standard beer lover. But our gluten-free customers have been a minority we haven't really serviced very well. And because my wife's gluten-free and I've got a number of other gluten-free friends, I was kind of expected to kind of make these kits eventually. And luckily, we've also had Two Bays Brewing join up to make these for us. Now, I should say these gluten-free kits, we've been very careful to go to a dedicated gluten-free facility. They don't use any, grains containing gluten because, one way to try to make a gluten-free beer is to use enzyme to break down barley and then basically get gluten and break it down into smaller compounds so it becomes gluten-free. But we haven't done that. These kits are derived from things like rice and millet and buckwheat and grains, which are kind of a little bit tricky to source. So the grains themselves don't have any gluten in there to begin with. So even if you're extremely sensitive, you're a very sensitive celiac and you can't even have a little crumb in something because it gives you a bellyache, these are perfectly safe. Also, I should say, all the Lullerman yeast that we sell as well are also gluten-free. So, if you're pairing this up with a gluten-free yeast and dry hopping with the dry hops we sell, you'll still have a completely gluten-free product. And basically, we've made two kits. So we've got a basic kit here on this side, which is called the GFW, and Two Bays have kind of, made this recipe to emulate their GFB recipe, I suppose. And then also we've got this product here, which is kind of like mimicking the Two Bays Pale Ale recipe. Now, when we put these on the website, we're also going to pair them up with different hops and different yeasts. So the two kits will essentially be able to purchase under a few different variations, I guess you'll say. Because the GFW has a fair bit of rice and a little bit of sorghum in there, it does actually come at a lower price point. But this one here, so this is basically the Two Bays kind of like pale ale version of the kit. This one's made with a lot of the kind of expensive and complicated grains to brew with. So this one is a little bit more expensive on the website. I should also say this is sort of like a big leap forward for me because I've tried brewing gluten-free in the past for friends who are gluten-free and I haven't had much success. In the past, really the only options were getting sorghum syrup, and if you just get straight sorghum syrup and try to ferment it, I've never been able to do a really fantastic job of it, to be quite frank, and they never really taste like what I would call beer, to be quite frank. The other option I had was going down the path of all grain brewing and trying to source things like, the millet and the rice, malted rice and stuff like that. And those grains are very hard to get, especially in their malted form. You can't just buy, rice from the supermarket, for instance. So to get something which tastes like beer, really those grains had to be imported, from places like Europe or America. They were very expensive to begin with. Once they go through the malting process, they're even more expensive. And then the problem is the grain sizes, vary depending on the different types. So then you have to set your mill up differently for different grains. And then you've got the other problem that, your brewery you have to change over and put different screens in because you've got, small things like millet. If you're trying to brew that all grain and ask anybody who's given that a go, it's really complicated. It means a lot of stuck sparges. It means like you have to modify the brewery to suit those grains, and it's just a massive, ball ache, to be honest with you. So being able to bring out gluten-free fresh Wort kits like this, which take the headache out of it, pour it in your fermenter, put yeast on top, I think it's a fantastic product. And finally, it's a product which I feel proud to bring to market, share with you guys, and hopefully include these gluten-free, beer lovers out there who have been missing out up until now. Anyway, let's get stuck into it. I'm going to also show you a little interview I had with Kristian Martin, who's the head brewer at Two Bays Brewing. He's the one that has basically made this possible for us. And also Richard as well, who I've been hassling to try and get these kits done for ages. Anyway, I'll get into the rest of the video. And look, if you've got a gluten-free friend, please share this video with them because they probably don't even know that home brewing is an option. They probably gave up on it a long time ago. So share this video with a gluten-free friend. They'll appreciate it, and so will we. All right, that's it. I'll let you get on to the rest of the video.
Key, welcome to Two Bays.
Oh, thanks for having us. I have been hassling you guys to do a brew day down here for like over a year because we've been really looking forward to do gluten-free beer. And look, my wife's also gluten-free now, so try to make something for her is pretty difficult. I've been doing a few ginger beers, but beyond that, it sort of gets boring pretty quickly. So, we've been really so keen to get stuck into some gluten-free fresh wort kits. And obviously coming down to you guys as an award-winning brewery has been obviously a match made in heaven for us. So,
Cool.
yeah, but you guys literally have also won an award, haven't you?
We got a trophy, so
Yep.
champion at the IBAs for the specialty ale for this bad boy.
Yep.
And a gold for the Pulp Fusion, so pretty proud of that.
Yeah, nice one. So look out for those guys, they're on sale now. So with the whole gluten-free fresh wort kits, what do we got here? How would you describe the flavour of what we've brewed today?
There's really kind of two product separations, and what you'll notice the difference in our branding is the GFB is a slightly different branding to our regular Two Bays one, and there's a price difference with those as well. So it's based on the extracts that we use. I mean, for people who aren't familiar, we're brewing with all alternative grains, the non-gluten-free based stuff. So it's not enzyme reduced beer. It's naturally gluten-free from the whole way through.
Yep.
And the facility itself, we don't bring any gluten, products, any barley on site. None of our equipment is shared with a brewery that might be using that kind of equipment. It's all naturally gluten-free. It's from these grains. But the difference between the two products and the two tiers, I suppose, is that this is made from a syrup-based extract, whereas these are made from an all malt extract. And similarly, the Two Bays Fresh Cubed versus the GFW Fresh Cubed is sorghum rice malt syrup versus all grain extract, which we use predominantly millet, but as well rice and corn. So
Yep.
it's a very, very expensive product, and this is hard for the gluten-free consumer. I suppose Richard, the founder, always likens to the fact that a slice of a gluten-free bread is a lot cheaper. If you're not a celiac versus if you are a celiac, the gluten-free bread is really expensive, and we suffer some of those challenges as well. So
yeah. And it looks like just a nightmare of a process as well, I must say. I mean, I was sort of looking into, whether we could put together some gluten-free all grain kits originally and thinking, surely we can do it, mill up some grain and stuff like that. But then, you look at these grains and you think, oh my God, I am not going to put these two things through my grain mill. I've got stuff which is, tiny little, granules like that for the buckwheat. And then you've got stuff which is much bigger. And look, I reckon it would just be a nightmare. I know with grains for normal barley, the barley varies in size a little bit and people tweak their mills and stuff like that. But when you get down to this type of size, like you almost need to adjust even the type of knurling on the mill and that type of stuff to really do a good job of this. It must be just a nightmare dealing with these grains.
It's not a nightmare. I mean, we've had a lot of practice though, so we've come a long way. We have some custom-made equipment that helps with that process, which kind of tries to catch anything that might be let loose from the lauter tun. And the rice as well, it is, as you can see, it's a rice malt, so it still has its hulls on it. We do supplement some extra hulls into the mash as well to help with that process, but it's a challenge. Milling, for example, milling rice is really, really hard. Milling corn is even harder. So, I mean, I know you guys sell really good homebrew mill kits, but I've actually tried to put some of those grains through that kit, because we had a pilot system, it didn't hold up, unfortunately. So, or we had trouble actually forcing the grains through. So what tends to happen is with the corn, which is a large kernel, sometimes it doesn't actually catch it. It doesn't want to pull it through the mill as well. So these things can be a bit of a challenge for the home brewer. And they're a challenge for us, but I'd say we've spent a lot of time doing it, working with these things. And fermentation as well. We've put a lot of energy into working out how we manage our nutrient profiles through the process. Sometimes it's supplementation, sometimes it's enzyme reactions that we work on that help make sure that the fermentations have enough nutrients. You have to remember that barley has been modified over a long period of time to basically ensure that the maltsters and the farmers ensure that when the brewer goes to brew it, that there's sufficient stuff for the yeast there to ferment the beer. So these grains that have only really been used for brewing commercially in the last 10 years, even though some of them are considered ancient grains, they haven't gone through the same modification processes that ensure that you're definitely going to get conversion in your mash, and you're definitely going to get all the nutrients needed for fermentation. So.
Yeah. So one of the beauties about, I guess, fresh wort kit, a lot of that hassle is taken out of it. Like even the converting process, like you can't just let the grains convert on their own. Enzymes have to be added. Is that right?
That's correct. And there are some really good homebrewers out there that have done a lot of work on this, but you do have to acquire the enzymes. They're not as easy to get in Australia as they are in the US. And it takes, I'd say, probably a little bit of extra talent to try and produce the same results. You know, if I was giving advice to someone trying to do that, I would say a basic starch iodine test is a really, really handy thing to do and look at.
Yeah.
And it's hard because there's not a lot of data to tell you exactly what the gelatinization temperature of the malt is going to be.
Yeah.
I think it's taken for granted sometimes in the barley brewing world.
Yeah, totally. It's like a thing of the past these days. You don't even think about conversion. All the grains convert so fast and so well, you don't even think about it.
100%. And the temperatures are just lower. So if I mashed in at, say, 66 degrees with a Pilsner malt or an ale malt, I wouldn't need to necessarily stress that I wasn't going to gelatinize. Whereas our mash temperatures actually start at like at 80 degrees temp to make sure that we have actually gelatinized the grains.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, the other thing with gluten-free products is people always talk about the cost, and really this is something where a lot of people balk at it. And look, these are not exactly going to be as cheap as our other, wort kits. And why is that the case? Is it just because it's a smaller scale, or is there just more to it?
That's definitely part of it. The reality in Australia is that there's no dedicated gluten-free maltings facility. So all our grains are imported from the US. And you know, we would like to see that change one day, but it's not the case. So they're actually malted on a dedicated gluten-free facility as well, which really suits the philosophy of what we, follow here at Two Bays, and that's zero tolerance gluten-free. So, it's different maybe if you're avoiding gluten, then a low level of gluten might not be a risk. But if you're celiac, it becomes more of a risk, and is something that doesn't really embody, our mentality to have crossover equipment. So. That's one reality. The American dollar hasn't helped, and the cost of shipping, but it's also just, like you said, scalability, the price of the crop itself. So imagine you were at the supermarket, buy a kilo of oats versus a kilo of puffed millet, which is a product you can buy these days, or buckwheat. They are just simply more expensive.
And I mean, most of the ingredients, they seem to be in the vicinity of, between 6 and 8 times more expensive than, the barley alternative. So naturally, the product kind of has to be more expensive.
That's right. So it's a reality of the gluten-free game, unfortunately. But and when you see the price of gluten-free bread come down, you'll probably see beer come with it. But it's not looking good at the moment, unfortunately.
Likely. Fair enough.
But then, like you said, we did have this sort of lower tier product. It is quite a good product. It is more of what we call like a draft lager base, which is brewed with the rice malt syrup and the sorghum syrup, and it's a good product as well. So. Those syrups don't allow us the same kind of creativity in terms of the malt profiles that we can build. We can't build stouts with those malt profiles, for example. And you saw the brews today. There's a fair bit of colour added to the brew from the crystal malts that we use, and they come with sweetness and some of the advantages of using crystal malts in a regular, pale ale or IPA kind of brew. So really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Well, with these two brews, also, we were going to provide them as bases, so you could ferment them out as they are, then make great beer. But also we were thinking about basically using the two bases and then sort of skewing them off in different directions depending on what yeast you use and stuff like that. I've heard of you guys using a bit of ginger with some of the beers you're doing as well.
We did a ginger version of the GFB beer.
And
we sold it as a ginger beer, but it's quite a dry ginger beer. And a lot of the commercial ginger beers that are available are very much a sweetened sugar-based product. I suppose the challenge of it was you need to use a fair bit of ginger. And my preference is for dry ginger rather than, say, a grated ginger. I would use some of that, but mostly the dry ginger, and particularly because it drives the pH down quite low. It is actually kind of acidic.
So have you got any tips for somebody if they got this kit, for instance, and then sort of like putting some ginger in there?
I would probably reboil it if I could, and I would steep a lot of just regular dry ginger. And despite what a lot of internet recipes say about putting lemon, I would be dubious about putting too much lemon in. If I was going to get a complex flavour, I'd use a dry peel. Just because the acidity can be a bit dangerous, particularly with a gluten-free ferment, in terms of driving the pH down too low and causing an unhealthy environment for the yeast.
I see.
But that's my preference in flavour as well. I like that dry ginger kind of flavour.
I see.
And there's nothing to stop you from adding more to the fermentation as well. Because it doesn't have a sweeter base, you do maybe have to get a bit heavy-handed. Something we did look to trial here, which we didn't because we don't use lactose in the brewery, would potentially be a bit of lactose to help boost that sweetness. I believe historically some of the commercial ginger beer kits that were available used to use a fake sweetener, but I think we'd probably get a better result from a lactose-based sweetener, which is a non-fermentable. So.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like, there's still a lot of ginger beer kits out there that would use that artificial sweetener, and it's got a very distinctive kind of taste about it, which just sort of isn't really that pleasant, to be honest with you. So, I think that sounds like the better way to go.
Purely because, it just so happens that there are some people out there that avoid gluten, often avoid lactose as well, that it didn't really sit our brand ideology. In terms of where we're going with the recipe, but we also just like the dry product. It wasn't necessarily going to be something for everyone everywhere. It was just a specialty release we did as an extension of the GFB series. So that was with the GFW, style wort kit. So.
And with the pale ale sort of wort that we've got here, are there any sort of tips you'd give the guys to ferment that out and dry hop it in a different way as well? Like, we'll probably package up a few different dry hops so people have got options of different dry hopping kits that they can add with this as well, and different yeast.
Keen to see how they go with it. So we've got some passionate homebrewers here across the business, which you've seen today. I think both the other brewers homebrew, I homebrew. We have people in our marketing department that homebrew all the time, and we love to chat about it. So I like to see the creativity, but I wouldn't underestimate how flexible you can be with the wort. We have created something. We've used a mosaic base, which I think is a really good hop. If you weren't going to go down the path of a hazy, it's a good base for that. But also a West Coast IPA or just a pale ale, it's a hop you see around a lot. It's the second most prominent hop besides Citra, I believe, if I'm right. So. No major tips. I do stress about the importance of yeast health with some of these fermentations, and making sure you have plenty of yeast and not taking for granted that some of the nutrients may be lower than you say barley wort IPA that you might be brewing. And as well as getting experimental with the dry hop any which way. The bitterness has been kept low, really reasonably to a pale ale profile. So if you were going to go West Coast, you may want to find a way to compensate a little bit with the bitterness. But the added advantage is if you wanted to brew a hazy, there's nothing stopping you there from pitching a Verdant style yeast and doing a day one dry up and producing really cool hazy. So
I must say that was more or less specifically why we were sort of chasing this particular type of wort, because it was quite versatile. We could sort of push in a few different directions, maybe even going down a wheat beer angle, and we'll try that and test it out. But today when we get some of this wort back home, one of the first things we'll do is get a whole lot of fermenters going with different yeasts and different hops in there, and then see how they pan out. And once we work out a few good recipes, we'll put them on the website and share them with all you guys as well. But
it's got a reasonably robust malt profile. I think people will see that in the colour, but I think that does help add to some of the body and flavour complexity of the beer. So if I was, for example, brewing a West Coast IPA on my homebrew kit, which I do quite regularly, I would use a fair bit less probably of the crystal coloured malts, because that's my preference. But when we develop the gluten-free recipes, we use the same mentality for the session ale. Sometimes we overcompensate a little bit in the gluten-free world, knowing that you might not get the same level of mouthfeel. So some of those extra unfermentable sugars and the colours help build the flavour profile.
Nice one.
And I'm hoping that the homebrewers out there are pretty keen for a pretty flavoursome recipe, so it should be good.
Absolutely, Well, that probably wraps it up. That's all the questions. But really, I just have to say a massive thanks for working with us on this project. It's such a privilege to be able to work with Two Bays. I've got some gifts for you guys as well. So I've got some merch. I know you guys have been eyeing out our beach poncho, so I actually got you a couple of them as well, because they've just been so hot flying off the shelf. Not really, but and there's some stubby holders and an apron as well. But so happy to be able to bring this product to market and enable us to brew beers. A lot of us home brewers, all of us have at least one friend who's gluten-free, and it's nice to be able to just brew a beer, just as easily as all the other beers that we're normally having to do, but not have to worry about all the hassles of, enzymes and milling these tiny little grains and stuff like that, and having stuck sparges and finding, screens for our mash malt pipe, which are finer so that all the grains don't fall through and stuff like that. And all these headaches have been removed by this product. So, very, very keen to get it out there and start brewing for some of our other friends who are gluten-free.
And it's great that it's been packaged here as well, being a zero tolerance facility, on site. And I think that brewers do need to be a little bit wary. If they are doing it for their celiac friend, just be careful of the sharing of equipment and chat to them about the potential risks. But was it your partner, you said, avoids gluten as
that's
well?
right. So she, it actually took us a while to work it out, because, had a couple kids, and then, she was sick a lot of the time and feeling a bit tired, and, just we just put it down to having kids and then, you know, being pregnant and all that. But then after all of that passed, we just sort of changed our diet around, couldn't really work it out. It was only up until when we actually kicked gluten that she started to feel a lot better.
Yeah, cool.
And then we got her blood tested and stuff like that, and sort of turned out that was the case. So it's amazing how many people these days are actually gluten-free and don't even know it. But
well, we got you a present as well for being a great Two Bays supporter.
Yeah, cheers.
And we know you're pretty famous in the homebrew world these days. So
thanks. Thanks, Kristian. Yeah, much appreciated. Cheers, legend. All right, well, thanks for that. And if you guys have any other questions, just put them in the comments below. And look, if I can't answer it, I'll fire it off to Kristian, see if he can answer it. But yeah, very excited to get this product out to market. Share it with your friends, of course. So if you've got a gluten-free friend who thought that home brewing wasn't an option, share these kits with them and get them into it as well. And of course, subscribe to the video. Bottom right-hand corner, hit subscribe now. That's it. All right, thanks again.
Cheers.
Legend.
Thanks for Two Bays.
Yeah, no worries.